This one is the evolution of customer engagement, how to deliver value and cultivate long-term relationships. In particular, we're going to dive into more of the financial life annuities and that side. We did a PNC discussion yesterday, so a good mix of topics for everybody this week. I'm Bryan Falchuk. I'm your host and moderator today. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book series, The Future of Insurance from Disruption to Evolution. And I am joined by a fantastic panel that is really going to dig into a number of things that we face around how we adapt our people, our processes, our technology, our culture as a whole to meet what has really been a market shift in the expectations of customers. And the table stakes are much higher in having to meet those expectations really than they've ever been. And this is clearly the path going forward. So how do we adjust and change so that we get not just engagement today, but think about the long-term engagement with our customers? So I am joined by today's great panel. We have Ketty Trivedi, who's the Chief Marketing Officer from Prudential. We have Christian Mitchell, who's the Chief Customer Officer for Northwestern Mutual. And Bair is the SVP of Marketing for Nationwide. And Meredith Barnes-Cook, who is the Head of Global Insurance for Ushur. So with that, I want to jump right into the discussion. But before I do, I want to remind you, there's a little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please do click that and submit your questions, because after we hear the opening thoughts from our panel, we are going to take the questions from all of you, and you'll hear from everybody what they think about what you care most about. So throughout this discussion, please do submit your questions into that Q&A function, not the chat, but the Q&A. So just look for that. Ketty, with that, I'd love to open up with you and get your thoughts from Prudential.
Thank you, Bryan, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here again. Bryan, the topic is so valid, right? Especially in the environment that we're in. And you mentioned about just how consumer expectations are changing. And I believe that the way just any organization does business and the way the organization views customer relationships, whether it's across all industries, has changed dramatically over the last few years. Transactions, I think, as we all know, that used to happen in person or through a web platform have now basically transitioned just to an expanded omni-channel universe, where as a customer, and I'm sure we can all apply this even to ourselves, we could have started a journey in one channel and we're ending it in another. So I think just, understanding how the customer operates, understanding how we're really truly bringing needs-based solutions to them from an insurance perspective beyond customer segments is really key to ensuring that we're assessing their needs and meeting them, where they need to be met.
Yeah, there's no question. People want to come in how they want to come in, when they want to come in. And you said omni-channel, not many single channels. So it's that notion of flexing with the way that they came to you today and being responsive to that. Yeah, totally agree. Christian, similar space, but different company. I'm wondering what your take is from Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. This is a wonderful panel, and it's good to be with you again, Bryan. You put on great events, and I always really appreciate the discourse. So three things I just briefly cover in my opening comments. First, just ground everyone a little bit on Northwestern Mutual, because I think it's important context for some of my comments. Then I'd actually like to make a few kind of provocative statements about where the industry is today and where we may need to go in the future. So starting out with Northwestern Mutual, we really operate from this premise, this understanding that Americans are not financially secure. They're stressed about their money, their financial lives feel disorganized. And we and our advisors in the digital experience we're bringing, we really want to bring order so people can make better decisions. And that idea of helping our clients be more financially secure is pretty near and dear to our hearts as a mutual company. We really serve and seek to drive the best interest of our clients. And so for that, with that in mind, a few aspects flow and are key to our business model. We believe the future is about the digital plus advisor. That is the best way to help clients be financially secure. And as we talk about personalization, loyalty, confidence, we really think the key to that is the artful blend of both the human and digital going forward. Secondly, we're committed to financial planning. We think financial planning is not only a way to help our clients be more financially secure, but it provides a means of gathering data, of understanding our clients in such an intimate way that it can drive a tremendous amount of personalization. And finally, our approach to planning is based on risk plus investments. That by looking at the two of those holistically, we can serve the client in his or her totality, and we can actually drive better financial outcomes for those clients. And we have the math that we can prove it. So that's some context on how we think about many of these issues from the standpoint of Northwestern Mutual. So a few thoughts on the industry. I think the industry is in a precarious situation right now. We really have got to act with urgency if we really want to drive client intimacy going forward, or alternatively, we're just going to be relegated to product manufacturing. So some things that I think are working against us are headwinds. There are a lot of industries that have been on the client experience bandwagon for a while. I think they're ahead of us in certain ways, crucially around data science. I think some of the regulatory barriers to entry have allowed us to not be as sharp on these issues as perhaps we need to be. And lastly, we've been also fortunate that as you look at a lot of the fintech startups, particularly in the life insurance space, they've got so many pieces of the equation right, but client acquisition costs, they just can't crack that. When and if they do, it's going to be a real challenge for the incumbent player. So those are some of the headwinds. But some things that give me real confidence is I think all of us have proven, all the life insurance company, the annuity industry over the last 12 months, that when faced with a crisis, exogenous pressure, we can act quickly and do amazing things and digitize our businesses faster than maybe we thought possible. And so I think going forward, we've got to capitalize on that momentum. As the pandemic recedes, not let that also take our sense of urgency away, but actually redouble our sense of urgency around digitization. Think about, again, this artful mix of the human plus digital, and then think about in general how we mix some of the new technologies with traditional areas of strength. And despite the headwinds we face, as I look at the performance of the industry in 2020 and some of the early performance in 2021, it gives me a lot of hope in terms of what we can do and how we drive relevance and sustainability in the years to come.
Christian, I'm holding back questions that you're sparking for me because there's a lot of things I want to dig into in this, but I already see we've got one Q&A question in there. So hopefully from Ketty's comments, from Christian's comments, some thoughts are coming to people's mind. If not, I am going to hit you with something that you sparked. So that was a great intro. Anne, can you share some thoughts on your side coming from Nationwide?
Yes, Bryan, thank you. And thank you to you, and thank you to my colleagues on the panel today. And a special thank you to all of you who are tuning in today for this webinar. I thought before I jumped into some of my thoughts on the topic that since I'm a newcomer to these webinars, I know some of my colleagues on the panel have done other ones and the audience may be familiar with them. I thought I would just share a couple points of background on me and a bit on Nationwide. So first of all, I lead the marketing organization for Nationwide Financial, which is our financial services organization. And I've had the great privilege of working in a lot of different categories across my career, but I just have such a strong passion for financial services. And I think I'm seeing that passion come out in my colleagues as well, and how we think about our businesses, how we think about our partners, as well as about our clients. So, but most recently, before this role in marketing for financial services, I was Nationwide's Chief Digital Officer, which was a really exciting assignment for me, and one that, as I was preparing for today's comments, a lot of that experience as CDO kept coming back to me. And it was an interesting experience for me because it was both digital marketing, and it was also the build, what we considered the build of digital capabilities. So working on how can we make our website, our mobile apps, chatbots, et cetera, how can we make them easier, more compelling for our advisors and for our clients to use. So when you talk about kind of general comments about the industry, about the marketplace, about our customers, a couple of things come to mind. And first of all, I think for my colleagues as well as for us at Nationwide, one of the key things that we're focused on is how can we make things simple for all of our target audiences. I think we're all distracted by a million things, so many different things are going on, and the degree to which we can make our categories, which can definitely be complicated and complex, the degree to which we can make interacting with us simpler, I think just helps our clients to be better prepared for the future and to be able to dedicate time to other things that they consider priorities. So in my mind, the couple of key things that are important for that is, first of all, you have to be relevant. So it's not helpful if a company is serving you information or is serving you solutions or trying to simplify things for you that aren't relevant to you. So it's very, very important to be relevant. And also I would echo some of the comments from Ketty and Christian around being personalized and being holistic. So sometimes a digital solution, technology solution, can really take one of our audiences like all the way and help them to get things, to take care of the things that they need to do, but sometimes it isn't. And so it's important for us to give our clients and our customers, our advisors, et cetera, a way to interact with us in person or interact with us in a way that's most helpful and most compelling for them. So I often think about our category and how we can show up with all of our different audiences through that lens of being relevant and being holistic so that we can really help them solve their problems and plan for the future.
And when you say holistic, I am going to jump in with a question. Sorry.
Sure.
Is that about sort of to Ketty's point about omni-channel? Is it about all of their needs? Is it both of those things? Is it something else? What do you mean by holistic?
Exactly, and thank you for clarifying that. I think about it holistically in terms of all the different ways in an ecosystem that one of our customers could interact with us. But I think Ketty's word of omni-channel is a great way to describe it too. So if someone really needs to talk to you, that you provide that opportunity, or if someone just wants to like change their address, that they can simply go in and do it via a chatbot, for example. All the different ways. When I say holistic, I'm talking about all the different ways.
No, that's great.
Yeah, that someone would interact with us. Yeah. Thanks
Excellent.
for the clarification.
Well, and I think that probably was a really nice segue, unintentionally, but to Meredith, because your perspective, looking across many carriers in the industry, across lots of different contexts, and thinking about the interaction and the communication that carriers have to deploy with their customers, with their their members, insureds, whatever the phrasing is for that particular context. You get to see a lot of that across lots of different situations. So I'm curious your take from Ushur's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. Great to see you again, Bryan, and to meet some new colleagues, and welcome to the entire audience. Yeah, absolutely. Ushur, we are we're providing a opportunity for insurance carriers to, and I like the words, both omni-channel and I'm going to say holistic, of enabling that automated omni-channel interaction, both when a customer or claimant or member or agent or broker reaches in, or conversely, when the carrier may choose to reach out, being able to meet them through their channel of choice and making that really, really easy. But I look at holistic and I'll say, and across the full insurance journey. In the old days that I was part of during my 33 years at Liberty Mutual and some of the early online, the claim experience for the customer, going onto a website looked very different from the policy experience, very different from the billing experience. And what I think is really key is no matter where a carrier starts in that first touch point to solve for a problem or address a need of a customer, to be there where they want to be digitally, you need to think, okay, you've met them there, say, for setting up their billing plan. Great. You need to be providing that same experience to that customer for your brand when you are later going to be having an interaction with them on a claim, even if it's a different person. And I think that's really, really key. One of the questions we get a lot from our customers, and I even got when I was consulting, is, who should we be looking at from a competitive perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, stop looking within the insurance industry. Go look at Amazon. And the reason is, first and foremost, we are all unconsciously or consciously heavily influenced by the customer experience and expectations that we have through online retail. An organization that by design said they were going to be focused obsessively on the customer, and they wanted to be the most customer-centric company. And that was back in 1995, pretty groundbreaking premise that we're all striving in the industry to embody today. But the other reason to look there is, since they've been at it for a little bit longer, perhaps than some of the insurance industry has been, they've made mistakes that we can all learn from. Like we talked about, that omni-channel of, Digital is great. I'm a huge fan of self-service, but gosh darn it, it's still imprinted in my memory. In the early days of Amazon, I needed to talk to a person and there was absolutely no way to do that. And I haven't forgotten it a few decades later. And so that is the lesson learned, is the customer chooses where they want to be. And while studies will say that when given a choice, customers more often that will choose the digital self-service first. But if that's not the right option, it needs to be as easy to get to a person.
Having needed to talk to a person at Amazon recently, they were lovely and very helpful, but it was really hard to get through to them. Once I found the way, it was actually really, it was a simple process, but there's definitely a hurdle there. It didn't feel holistic, and to use your word, it didn't feel right, even though it was okay in the end. And maybe that's part of the history here is, well, they were able to do what they needed to do in the end. And maybe that's, historically been the way that the customer looked at things. And, I mentioned table stakes when we were opening, is I think the table stakes in the game have changed. And so this notion of like, well, but they got what they needed in the end anyway, doesn't necessarily make up for, Meredith, this example you have where you still remember that process today, even though you got what you needed in the end. Even though I got what I needed in the end the other day, I still remember that it was tricky to get there. Um, and we have enough examples in our day-to-day life that are teaching us otherwise. So good analogy. We do have questions coming in, which is great. And I would love to keep seeing them flow. I'm going to try to jump right in with the first, but I'm going to combine two. So there's one that I think is a really nice setup. And then there's another one that I think hits at the heart of what the question is. So hopefully I'm mixing these well, but there's this picture of the elevator pitch on the sales side and the marketing side. And, this is what the industry has trained for years. And for this person, they see that as still what's going on. And I think, for the panel here, maybe you're not seeing that in your organization, but surely it's going on in the industry still. And this person sort of bemoaning, why haven't we moved to training from the start in a much more digital way? And I think that's going to vary by institution. There are some companies that have embraced it and some that are maybe struggling, but no question, there are still some that are struggling. So the question I want to hit on as a follow into that is, Christian, it's your digital plus advisor notion. How do we best enable that? And maybe for those companies that are struggling a bit more with that move and still holding on to, well, this is how we've done it, and we just need to get through the pandemic, and then we can do it that way again. So we might as well continue on that path. What are some of the things we can do to start to have the plus matter there, so it's not one or the other? And Christian, it was your phrase, so I'm gonna start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, they're two very interesting questions. I mean, one is almost like this generalized question of, why aren't companies responding effectively to imminent disruption? And there are lots of, HBR business cases on why that is the case. But specific to like how we enable that digital plus the human, there are lots of facets to it. But one approach that has been very effective to us, and I don't think is necessarily particularly novel, is what we call co-creation. So as we're thinking about instituting new digital priorities, lead generation, improving client interaction on our mobile app, website, etc., we'll bring in our top advisors and actually form these small ad hoc committees around these topics and iterate through the development with them. So every 2 weeks, we're talking to them what works, what's not, showing them visualizations. Not necessarily that those advisors are going to dictate that digital experience, because ultimately it really has to delight the client. But through that iterative discussion with those advisors, we can distill some of their wisdom into the digital experience and help them wrap their heads around how the digital experience can help in certain aspects, and the human then can focus his or her attention on other aspects of client care. So it's that iterative discussion and back and forth that really allows us to, in the best circumstances, effectively weave together those two very important tools.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm curious, in Prudential's experience, Ketty, would you echo that, or are there other thoughts that you have about maybe where we've gotten stuck, and then how do we enable the bringing together of a new set of tools with something that is still really valuable in this space?
Yeah, no, I thank you, Brian. I agree with Christian. Lead management is a really important capability. But what's interesting is that with the person that asked the question is, yes, from a sales perspective, over the last few years, right, we've kind of moved from PowerPoint presentations to interactive presentations and things of that nature. Strategically and organically, again, last year, because of the pandemic, given that everybody in sales, right, wasn't physically traveling, people were virtual. And as you think about the sales pitch or the digital pitch, that transitioned organically to digital through a lot of marketing technology platforms. So at Prudential, what we had to do was, and what we had to very quickly pivot to is creating really an entire ecosystem of marketing technologies, such as capabilities like Seismic, Ceros, the On24 platform, where not only were we training our sales teams to deliver a pitch in a very succinct and a very concise way, but it also required us, right, to demonstrate and orchestrate how we visually bring the experience to life. How do we talk about data visualization when you talk about things like disability claims or life claims? How do you demonstrate that for a panel of individuals at the customer's end when you're presenting or pitching, for a new acquisition, or even just talking right from a retention perspective to the customer? So those are some of the capabilities that I think that, that we've really delved into. We've actually accelerated that use of that. And where the opportunity ahead for us is, again, going back to what Christian was saying, is what we did last year, again, organically, is we created a series of programs that we stitched together, as I would say. They weren't really created using the best of technology, but what we've done is, how do we try to get digital adoption? So, in addition to, right, a marketing organization or engagement, as we think about reaching the customer or the employer to get new business, there's always that organic air cover awareness generation that has always happened. How do you take awareness consideration to transitioning that to lead management is really the capability. So can we get a digital yes? Can we get a digital adoption from a customer to say, yes, I'm interested in this product or in this program or this capability. Who can I speak to, right? So transitioning from that, and how do you bring that experience to life in a very, very simplistic manner for the customer is where we're headed at this point. So I would say that, yes, we've transitioned extensively, but there's a lot more opportunity ahead of the game.
Yeah. So transition the mindset and more room to grow and to develop and clarify, both for the companies and for the customers even, because customers don't necessarily know exactly how they want to do it, but through experimentation, offering, start to figure that out. And the two words.
Bryan, if I could just add as well, and I would reinforce what Christian and Ketty have said here. I think the same is true at Nationwide. I think one of the bigger broad brushes that has happened in the industry is in the past where there may have been some resistance to digital adoption or resistance to digital sales or digital marketing. It over the course of the pandemic, while there were so many horrible things that happened as a result of the pandemic, I think one of the good things is that it dramatically accelerated the adoption of digital. I think it was to Ketty's point, like our sales teams had to work from home. They had to find ways to interact virtually. And that quickly drove the adoption curve. And we in marketing had to quickly leverage timely information. We had to leverage quick, easy ways for our partners, for our sales teams, as well as our end consumers to be able to access that information from us. So it was, I do remember those last, about a year ago, March, April, May, it was really requiring the organization to be incredibly agile, to pivot, to pilot, to try things. I think you mentioned experimentation, because it was this incredible, unique opportunity where people were suddenly not only open to digital adoption, but had to have, it was required if you were going to operate in the marketplace. So it represented for us across a lot of our different categories a tremendous opportunity. And because it's gone on for so long, and I think people are seeing now, you could print something and it could be shipped to you, or you could have something much more personalized and much more immediate by leveraging the digital tools and tactics. So I think it's been a great opportunity for us and ultimately for our customers as well.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I was hearing two words that are in your current and your most recent job description, right? The marketing side and the digital side. And so I was really curious about kind of bring that together for you, how that comes up at Nationwide. So it's great to hear that kind of living in the midst of it all in those first few months of lockdown and having to solve for the tools that you were building before and deploying with the mindset of how do you get messaging out, how do you engage with people with your marketing hat on. Meredith, your platform is all about touching the customer, interacting with them, solving their needs. So, I mean, this is sort of like the digital delivery of a lot of what we're talking about. What's your thought on how we maybe, to Ketty's point, get the transition and then grow from there so that we refine what we're offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And I resonated with so much of what we're hearing from the other panel members because it's what we've been seeing with our customers as well, including last year. And, thank heavens for some of them, we were there because it was an overnight shift of it's not a matter of whether you want to go digital, you have to. And in thinking like, for example, Medicare sales, you're in this space where you may be trying to reach out to an audience that may be very, very digital resistant, but it's an engagement you have to have. And what we found that with our customers is when we really say, kind of change management moment, right? It's a journey, and even if it's to a better place, it's hard. You got to think with that agility of mindset and say, take one piece of the process. And it might be the simplest one to solve for first. And it may not be at the beginning of that overall, it may not be the traditional and the sales journey begins here. It might be somewhere sandwiched in the middle. But it's a start and find where's that right touch point. And what we do find is when it can be the carrier reaching out, you're not trying to force somebody to come to you. You're not doing the field of dreams, build it, will they come, versus you find that, okay, we're in the middle of a conversation. Let's see if we can shift the conversation to digital, or we have to shift it to digital and find that really easy outreach like, hey, click here to schedule your appointment online since we can't take you to lunch anymore. And now we've got you connected. I mean, literally, that was that overnight pivot and something so dramatic. And then starting to be able to, now let's see, okay, so we've got their attention, they scheduled something. And then you say, okay, now let's introduce the idea of reminders to make sure that they actually show up for the call. And do we need to send out any quick tips of how to use Zoom? Those types of things. But it's really those little bites at a time to gradually get them there and be measuring and monitoring along the way. So you keep tuning the approach and the channel that you're using to that audience for that particular larger engagement. And it's building blocks. And that's what we see really, really works well. And it's not something we invented. I mean, that's the agile mindset.
Yeah.
And it really works well as you're trying to pivot somebody through such a change curve.
Yeah. Another thing with a big change curve goes back to one of Christian's provocative points. We have two questions that end up overlapping a bit. One is, how are you planning on leveraging AI? But the other one hits on one of the things, Christian, you mentioned around regulation. So how do you balance the need for more digital offerings with the regulatory landscape, including privacy and recent regulatory discussions regarding the use of AI? This actually came up in the webinar I mentioned yesterday around, if you need a licensed individual to do something today, and then you have technology doing it tomorrow, who's the licensed individual and how does that sit with regulatory requirements around licensing and a person doing something? So it's new for carriers, it's new for the regulators too. So as we think about new technologies like AI and bring that into how we educate, inform, and move customers through a process, how do we square that with the regulatory environment and needing to make sure that we're on the right side of regulation? Christian, you provoked it, so I'm going to ask you to open it if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what we're attempting to do is kind of separate the experimentation from the implementation, because often, working in such a heavily regulated industry, someone has a great idea, and then the regulatory or lawyers will say like, oh, we can't do that for reasons X, Y, Z, and it just gets killed and it doesn't go anywhere. So what we are really trying to do now is say like, hey, we are going to create a sandbox where that kind of unconstrained experimentation can take place. Let's learn a tremendous amount. Let's push the boundaries. And then as we have these insights, then we can marry it up with the regulatory reality today. And perhaps we use some of the insights that have come out of that kind of sandbox experimentation to try and influence the regulatory process in the right way. But I think if we fall into the trap of using where regulation today is as an excuse for not experimenting in an unconstrained way, I think it goes back to one of my provocative statements where we may just end up losing this race to be relevant to our clients and be relegated to just a pure product manufacturing standpoint. So I think this is a place where we are going to have to be very, very aggressive in terms of the internal experimentation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm going to come to you next because I feel like that's another interpretation of the word holistic. And I'm not trying to harp on it. I think it's brilliant, where if we just look at it as one thing or the other, we miss something here. And I know you were talking about, the communication channel, but thinking more broadly, it's the mix of the product and the way it's delivered, and the insights we bring for our customers, that starting to think more broadly about what we're putting out there. What's your take on where the regulatory side comes in, whether or how we navigate that as we try to think about new solutions?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll go back to what I said in my opening comment, which is the importance of relevance, of being relevant to our customers so that we can be compelling. And we've talked a lot about the holistic piece of it, but in this part of our discussion, I'd like to talk about relevance. And I think one of the key things that helps you to be relevant is an understanding of data and leveraging data. And it's just like mind-blowing how much data there is available. And this, I'll address the regulatory needs. I'm not an expert on regulatory or privacy. And this is something as an industry that is an issue for us in terms of new regulations and requirements, and some of the moves that are being made in the marketplace with Google specifically, et cetera. Absolutely, we must address that. But I'm working from the place that we would be addressing all of that. But I think for me, the key question for us, for our industry, is how can we leverage the data in a positive way, so that we can be relevant to our customers and provide them with things that are compelling, that are helpful, and that help them simplify their financial lives. And it's something, and you had mentioned AI, Brian, but I think even before you get to that, it's just going to be so important. Make sure that we get our arms around data, that we have the right data, that we're able to leverage it in a way that we can see actually works and that provides value. We've talked about how do we leverage our customer experience to provide value. And a key way that we can do that is by giving them things that are relevant and that we know that they're relevant because we have the information about our customers. So to me, it's a key foundational play. It's something that's not just a once and done. We have to constantly be optimizing data and making sure that we're leveraging it in an appropriate way. I know for myself, one thing that is always interesting for me is I love to see when I personally am served ads. Sometimes they absolutely hit the mark, and other times I'll just be like, I can't even imagine why someone is serving me this ad, because there wouldn't be anything in any of my profile or experience that would indicate that this would be a product that would be serving my needs. So I guess my point here would be the importance of relevance and the importance of leveraging data. And then beyond that, we can begin to think about how do you leverage AI and automation to be even more effective with what we deliver to our customers.
Yeah. And of course, some of those ads get too relevant where you're talking to someone, not even on the computer. Next thing you know, it's like Facebook must have heard what I just said. No, that's a great point.
Or too frequent. Like you search.
Yes.
We've all had that experience. You search, and then you're like pounded with, and
right.
then to me that's another piece of it is that's not working if you're getting pounded with ads that are no longer relevant to you.
Yeah. It's the definition of the word relevant. It doesn't just mean it fits the behavior. It needs to recognize the whole picture, which is that's too much. So you've gone from relevancy to exhaustion. So it's not relevant to them anymore because they're over it, or you're missing the fact that they did buy it or they did engage with it. So why do you keep advertising? I loved when I worked for a carrier and I would on Facebook constantly get ads for that carrier that I didn't get before I started working for them. It's like, no, yes, you figured something out about me, but I'm not the target customer, so not the right thing to be advertising. Ketty, can you speak to this a bit, and whether it's AI or anything else, and the mix of the regulatory framework we exist in and how we continue to move forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the regulatory framework is up front and center, right? And that purview kind of stays across everything that we do at Pru. I'll pick on Anne's theme and I'll expand on that because it's so critical as we think about AI and data sciences. And what we've really focused on at Pru is how do you harness, right, advanced data sciences and AI to solve high impact business problems. So for example, as we think about data sciences and AI, mortality modeling, fraud detection capabilities to solve some of the LTD claims that we may see kind of elements of that. How do we look at actionable insights for the business to achieve the significant economic value and customer focused improvements is where we've been focused on. An important area of AI that is so critical right now, I think, is also in terms of the end-to-end transaction as we think about customer engagement. So how do we look at service transactions and how do we start converting those, right, to lifetime value for that customer is where, again, how do you kind of keep that pulse and how do you start expanding on that opportunity is an area of focus at Pru.
Yeah, it's thinking about some of the different contexts for this. It's not just a sales question. We were talking about the long-term value of the customer and long-term engagement. So you have to be thinking about all these different places. That's a great point. Meredith, I wonder if there's a particular piece of the regulatory environment, maybe it's privacy, that is more front and center for the work that you do, or if maybe from your past you have more of a sense on this.
I mean, definitely privacy is front and center at Ushur, and we lead with that very early in the conversation because we appreciate how critical it is, and it's something that we are passionate about because it's in this industry, and it's just the trust of information and the interactions that we're helping automate and enable. And I think some of the things we were hearing other panelists speak about is the other piece of the equation when it comes to data is just, again, our customers are that much more digital savvy themselves. They're very aware of the power of digital and of data in their personal lives, and that fine line between value add outreach and spam. And it's a fine line, and sometimes you don't know you've crossed it until you've gone there. And so we talk with our customers about the key is there's the power of the massive amount of data you have. And in some carriers, especially I'd say in the P&C side from my journey, that data is very siloed and very understandably so between the policy and underwriting realm, the billing realm, and perhaps the claims realm. And even you look at the technology organizations, that's how they're organized and sell their products. And that's all fine and good. But when a customer calls in or strives to online engage in reporting on a claim or even making a change on a policy, and the first question you ask things is like, give me the year, make, and model of your car. The customer goes, what? Yeah. Wait a minute, you're a customer. Why are you asking me this? Don't you already know this about me? As opposed to, oh, you're calling about your 2016 Pathfinder, right? And all I have to do is go, yes, and I'm done. And I think those are the things that, what we try to work with carriers, say you're inside of how you're organized technology and data wise is understandable and necessary. But, how do you think about an end-to-end solution, a ring that can sit around that says don't care, and leverage AI to not let those silos any longer be customer exposed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking of a claim where the FNOL rep didn't even know that brand of vehicle was a car. She thought it was a model. It was a Volkswagen. She's like, what is that, a Ford? Is that some kind of Chevy? So that's a whole other problem. But wouldn't it have been nice if she didn't even have to go there because the carrier already had that information? So there's a question here that I think is a really nice call to the legacy of the industry, the intention of the people in it, and the transition that we all face. So I want to read this because I think it's really well put. It says, great advisors work diligently to ensure their clients' experience is top-notch. How are you helping advisors recognize that digital capabilities are complementary and additive versus intrusive and or just diminishing to the value that they bring. So there's actually been quite a bit of conversation in the Q&A about this difficulty in the transition, not just for the carrier, but for the customer facing side. And to use Christian's plus mentality, how do we get folks who have worked a certain way very successfully and with great intention and really nobility to what they're doing? How do we get them to transition into seeing something that maybe, on a low boil has been talked about as a threat to their existence, or it's not as good as what they've been doing? And, of course, we had this year where you didn't have a choice. I'm curious the experiences there, Christian, if you want to open us up with this, because I know, front and center for you guys, it could have been a make or break for you last year because if you didn't have those digital tools, you couldn't engage with your customers.
Such a tricky question. Yeah, I'll offer two perspectives. One thing that we really emphasize when we talk to our advisors is this is about the client. So often it's the home office and the advisors talking to each other, trying to change what one or the other is doing. Let's stop talking to each other and trying to horse trade, and let's both collectively focus on the client, because we have an aligned interest to make our clients more financially secure. So there's a mindset shift there that I think is really important. Secondly, one thing that's been really effective for us is we do a lot of client journey mapping. And what we'll do is as we're talking about our aspiration of what the future of that client journey might be like, we bring advisors in to have that iterative conversation with us and explore the art of the possible. So rather than it being a conversation, me telling an advisor or my team telling an advisor, like, this is how it's going to change, and having them walk away from that conversation with a sense of loss, it's, hey, let's all come together. Let's collectively look at this journey map. And let's tap into the deep wisdom and creativity of these advisors, because they've been working with clients for decades and decades. They've got insights in terms of how to move a client to action, or where there's a client pain point or moment of truth that I don't know if folks in any home office are ever going to fully appreciate. So if we can bring them into the conversation, explore that art of the possible, talk about the future, it can be a really powerful means of helping them wrap their minds around, and even sometimes get really excited about a future that maybe previous to a conversation would have felt very threatening.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it is tricky. It is sensitive, and that's why I loved the way that this person phrased the question, because it starts from a recognition, not, oh, these people are not being open-minded. They're not. Look, these are people who worked very hard trying to meet the needs of, going back to the original notion. I think Christian, you said it. Americans really aren't in a position of having their finances, kind of well mapped out and secure for the long term. So all very well intentioned. We need to bolster and support, and not just sort of write off as, well, you need to change or die. It's just not the way. It's not a meaningful way to look at things. And could I get your perspective on this? Given that not just the marketing, but your digital past as well. How do you see this question?
Yeah, thank you, Bryan. As I was thinking about the discussion, one of the things that struck me is that recently, nationwide, actually kind of in the thick of the pandemic, we did a survey to understand. It was actually a multi-year survey that we've been doing every year, but we were evaluating the changes in the past year, given the pandemic, because we know that the pandemic has really hurt a lot of Americans and has really hindered people's ability to save for retirement. And we wanted to understand what that impact looked like. And this was particularly through the lens of women investors, because there's been a lot of data reported that women have been particularly impacted by COVID, by job losses, by the need to stop working so that they could fulfill some of their other responsibilities. So one of the things that we saw was that people their ability to save for retirement was being impacted. But one of the key solutions to that was getting help. And one of the things that we were really inspired and excited to see over the course of the past year is that many more people, and now what we saw in our survey was that about 2/3 of women are now seeking advice and seeking help so that they can be in a better position for retirement. And I've shared this story with different groups, that my own grandmother, who passed away at 102, and she actually worked with a financial advisor for about 60 years. That clearly this advisor helped her to have plenty of money to live until she was 102. But that's just an example that shows the very positive impact that getting help, that getting advice, and that leveraging an advisor can bring. And so I'm very inspired by the fact that we saw in our survey of hundreds of people that more were leveraging the advice from advisors and were getting help. So to me, this is an inspiring thing. And I think that the advisor community is finding ways to meet customers where they are and meet clients where they are and to connect with them. And I think that's good for all of us if everyone can be more prepared for retirement. So to me, this is a very exciting and inspiring and encouraging trend that we have seen in our data.
It's a nice reminder of why the industry exists, right? Ketty, I'm curious about your perspective as well on this, because it's something you would face too.
Yes, so I'll give you two perspectives on this. One from the advisor point of view across what we see within our individual and annuities businesses is similar to what my colleagues here just stated. What we've been doing is we've been trying to really lean in on the voice of the customer concept, which is how do we bring their feedback in? How do we bring them into the packaging of the program, packaging of the capabilities? Even when we're building, a digital experience for them, how are we getting the advisor's point of view? And getting them to understand that this is really a capability that will further enable them to really drive more right outcomes as they interact and connect with their customers. So that's been one piece of it. If I shift a little bit away from the advisor to your traditional salesperson, right, on the group side or on the retirement side of the house, again, they're so used to, I think Meredith was the one that said to take the client out for lunch and bring them into a physical site, right, and give them a demo of things. What we're doing is we're transitioning that site visit that would have happened in person into a virtual site visit and training them on the tools of how to present that in an extremely interactive way. So yes, there is a little bit of a learning curve there. There's a little bit of lean-in that's required there. But I think what I'm seeing is over the last few months that there is a sense of interest in terms of leaning into that area, because that clearly is the future, right? So I would say voice of the customer, bring them in at the upfront and get them to be part of the exercise.
Yeah, well, and great call out to the customers in this as well, because it's not a one-sided equation when you're talking about an advisor or a salesperson. There's someone on the other side of the table, whether it's virtual or an actual table with food or coffee on it, which would be nice again. Meredith, you're seeing the interactions and you're part of those tools that are the evolution. So what are what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think, Bryan, you said first and foremost, it's always key for everyone to understand what the ultimate goal is. And sometimes with technology, and I go back to working on a claims system 25 years ago, that for a point in time started sounding like, and we're just going to get rid of all the adjusters. It kind of lost its way in its point. It was like, okay, let's dial this back. What's the objective? What's a success look like? And it came back to, like what we talk about digital transformation now, it's about optimizing your people. It's about enabling to have them be able to get there that much quicker, that much faster with the things where either as a carrier, that's where you want to have your people engaging. Or again, as we talked about before, regardless of how simple the question is, the customer would like to talk to someone and you want to not have that be, and now you can hold in queue and leave a message, et cetera. So I think that's a piece of it, people understanding the why, the 5 whys of why are we doing this? But then, when we talk about that, leaning into the voice of the customer, we always see with our customers that they realize one of the key insights into the voice of the customer is actually through your employees who are interacting with them all day long. And when you kind of say, kind of, why don't you pull your journey a part of it and kind of let's start decomposing what you do day in and day out, so breaking those into what we call these micro engagements and start saying, so what's the micro engagements that you look at that one individual step and say, I don't know, a person doesn't have to be doing that. That one piece could come out and you look at that and say, so let's say, and then you start teaching them how to say, now let's start talking about, and how often do you have to do that? And that starts letting you almost build that agile backlog of these little automation opportunities that add value from two ways. A, it's going to speed up the availability of the people. It odds are will probably speed up the process. And it is just over time taking those little snippets of really what are perhaps now in the current stage of technology waste away from the employee. They don't even see it anymore. I mean, I knew that. I mean, I had to do it my own journey in when I worked at an insurance company. I couldn't see it because I just was used to doing it.
Yeah.
All these little manual bits, parts and pieces and handoffs. And when somebody said, break it all apart, I was stunned to myself of, wow, I can't believe these are all the manual things that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's shocking and it can seem daunting and still doable. And there's value to find in it for the employees and for the customers on the other side of that experience.
And if I could just chime into that point, and I think it's easy for people to misunderstand when we talk about wanting to automate a process and an interaction. It's not because it's not important. We're not trying to move it away from the employee because it's not important. I always say, if we're doing it, it's important. It's just either the customer A is saying, I want options to perhaps do it differently sometimes, and or the technology has finally come to the center where it can help get it done. It's not saying it's not critical work. It's just there's different ways. As employees, it's hard. We get very emotionally attached to what we do. Yeah. And when someone says we're going to take this away, well, that's not important? It's like, oh no, it is. And that's why we want to automate it because it's important.
Yeah, right. We're not going to invest in it if it isn't.
Right.
I do want to, I think we only have time for one more question, which is painful because there's 12 unanswered. And they keep coming in. So every time I think I've found the one, there's another one that pops in. I think this is a nice one for us to end on thematically though. So it's around bringing that voice of the customer in, bringing that feedback in, and using that to guide the kind of customer experience of CX decisions we make. Again, this one's really well worded, so I might just read this directly. How do you bring customer feedback and the importance of that to the forefront of everyone at your organization to create a CX mindset everywhere, and that it's part of all of the meetings and actions and things that we're doing? It's actually something I think as an industry we've tried hard at and struggled at, maybe different companies or the same companies at different times. So I'm curious about, for each of you, how you've been able to bring that customer view and needs into the equation of making those decisions, to Meredith's point, about something being important and being worth working on or changing or investing in. Christian, you, Chief Customer Officer, this is front and center in your role, so open this up for us.
Question. I mean, there's so many different directions we could take it in. It speaks to me deeply around a lot of the culture change that I've tried to drive at Northwestern Mutual, traditionally a very advisor-centric company. And as you've heard me say, our advisors continue to be incredibly important, but we have to infuse that client-centric DNA into the company. So I could talk on this question for quite a while. But one thing that we've done very tactically is, so on a monthly basis, I do OKR report out to my entire function. And a lot of those OKRs are very client-oriented, whether it's NPS or daily active users or all of that. So we have a very kind of rigorous, quantitative, holistic set of metrics that my entire function is looking at on a monthly basis. But what we do is we append to that OKR framework verbatims. We're constantly gathering clients' info from clients' comments. And so behind those OKRs are all these verbatims, things that are going well, things that are not going well, things that our clients would like us to change. And to have both of those kind of like the head and the heart as part of the regular monthly performance cadence for my function has been really powerful in terms of really moving everyone to really put themselves in the shoes of our customers.
So you're tying the feedback to the goal and keeping that front and center so people know the why of why this is on our objective list.
It's the numbers, but it's the emotion and the empathy, and you've got to strike the right balance between the two.
Yeah, well said. And what's the process at Nationwide? How are you making sure that customer need, that their desires are coming into the decision making around creating that customer experience?
Sure. One of the things that I'm really excited about at Nationwide is, much like you, Christian, we have a Chief Customer Officer who serves on our Office of the CEO, and she has done a terrific job of bringing focus around the key ways that we want to show up with our customers. And then that, I would say, is the high level view of how we look at this broadly and across our company. We have a big company, and we have a lot of different target audiences, a lot of different partners, as well as end clients. And so in addition to the higher level scorecard and the higher level quantitative, we also do a lot of surveys, a lot of quant work across the board with all of those different target audiences, depending on the business unit that we're working with. So I agree, Christian, it is the head and the heart. And I would say it's quantitative at a high level in terms of how people are thinking about nationwide broadly, but it's also at a much lower level with some of our much more specific target audiences and how they're responding. I think back to my my time in the digital organization, where we would be getting feedback across all of our digital tactics. So we had Opinion Lab on our websites, for example. So we were getting real-time feedback that was very tactical and tangible, that we could make almost in the moment changes on, to, as I said, more qualitative focus groups and panels, et cetera, with our partners within our end consumers. So it's just a very broad array and an ongoing effort to bring that voice of the customer into the room, and also to think about it in the lens of how we want to show up as an organization with all of these different constituencies. So yeah. It's very broad, but it can also be very, very specific.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think having that customer-centered leadership, right at the top, that is a move that we've seen in the past few years across a number of organizations. It's a newer thing for a lot of them, but it's important if you want to make it front and center, show that it matters, and put leadership behind it. But then you have to live it at the, at every level. So yeah, great mix from coming at it from both angles. Ketty, how about yourself and for Prudential? How are you bringing the customer's needs and their desires into the equation when you're making those decisions and those investments?
Yeah, at Pru, I mean, we have an entire team focused on voice of the customer within our customer experience organization. So we've been looking at this across the enterprise, so across all of our businesses, and targets have been set. I'll say that in some businesses like group insurance, we're a little ahead of the game versus we're kind of picking up our approach across other businesses. A few, tactical examples in terms of how we're really looking at the customer and measuring the voice of the customer is we've got a very robust mix of relationship and trigger-based surveys that are embedded throughout the customer experience. So whether we think about this from an employer, producer, or a participant perspective, that's embedded. As we think about all of our web-based experiences, right? Whether it's education, engagement, servicing, transaction, leveraging technology, again, to ensure that every session, every interaction, how are we capturing the trigger-based survey responses? Things like AI and technology being leveraged to even just determine any potential complaints or concerns as we think about our claims process. What's interesting is, and again, going back to what I was hearing Anne and Christian say about the quantitative piece, as I just gave you some examples, the qualitative piece has been actually very enriching, because we have something that we launched 2 years ago, the Client Advisory Board, where we have a subset of our customers, that come to that Client Advisory Board, and we get their feedback. We've established distribution field advisory councils where how do we get that qualitative feedback to keep that continuous pulse on the customer? And the intent here is, right, as we think about this, how do we further cascade not only the data or the insights, but very intentionally, what are our action plans to go against them or to go at them to ensure that we're actually, right, supporting and that we're going back and implementing the feedback that we're getting through the voice of the customer. So intentional focus, lots of momentum at Pru on this one.
No, that's great to hear. And I mean, recognizing bigger companies, there's going to be different speeds, different components. You said the group business is further ahead on that. There can be different reasons and dynamics, but everyone still needs to move forward. So maybe learning from each other, sharing those ideas on the pieces that move faster or move sooner, and spreading that out through the organization. It sounds like you have some tools in place to bring those insights in and flag up when we may have an issue. So it's good to hear. Meredith, you're going to get the final word. Give us some thoughts on how we bring CX and the customer's desires into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, it begins with our proof of concept, which we head into with the customer and starting off with KPIs of what's the goal. But we know it's key to have the ability to see in the moment. So how are customers actually responding to a new digital solution you've put up? And it's not just, so you're sending out text messages. Maybe you're also doing testing with email at the same time for the same interaction. And you want to be able to see, so, who's engaging and when are they engaging? Is there a problem even on, we found sometimes it's time of day of, we're sending it out at the wrong day of the week or the wrong time of day, or, you know what, email's not the place. As studies are showing, people are moving more and more to text. And just that perpetual pay attention every day to how your customers are starting to participate or not. And if they're not, experiment. Change the messaging, change the timing, change the vehicle, just keep playing with it and keep tuning it, because that's one way your customer voice is coming in, is through their participation or option not to. Yeah. And sometimes you're going to surprise yourself on what they really want versus what you thought they wanted.
Yeah. Well, it's a great point. Don't just look for the answer, look for the lack of an answer as well. Maybe that there's lessons on either side. Really rich conversation from a number of perspectives. And huge number of questions. I think this may be a record for what I've seen so far from any of the webinars, but excellent conversation today. Thank you to Ketty, to Anne, to Christian, to Meredith, and to Reuters Events for putting this on, and to the audience who stuck throughout this webinar. If you had to cut off or you missed it, you can catch it on the replay that will be emailed out to you. That was one of the questions we got early on. Thank you, everyone. Have a brilliant day. Great conversation on the customer experience and engagement going forward. So thank you.